Welcome to Salcombe Model Railway. I'm Graham. In this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to modify Peco O-gauge turnouts for more realism. So I'm going to be modifying a Peco turnout, this one here in the foreground. At the moment it's just laid straight out of the box. I'm sure anybody who's used Peco O-gauge turnouts will be very familiar with them. Including this nasty little box here that looks like a coffin. In real life they do have ramps there and protective covers to cover what are known as facing point locks, and those are used on passenger running lines, but you wouldn't see them in goods yards. So to have a layout where you've got those things everywhere isn't correct. So that's going to be one of the things that I'm going to be correcting. Now, there's actually quite a few things wrong with these turnouts, and to be a purist, you'd probably be better off hand building your track. But I'm just going to demonstrate a few things that can be done to at least improve them to be something a lot better. Another area is the sleepering up at the end here, particularly these diagonal sleepers here. They're not correct either. One of the biggest problems with these turnouts is that Peco have manufactured them to a size, and that actually causes a few problems. But I'm going to be showing how to fix that. Now, I do have some other turnouts that I've already done. There's another one over here, this one here, and you can see the coffin's gone, the sleepers have all been sorted out as well, and I think it looks a whole lot better. So the first thing we'll do is take this turnout out of the layout so that we can start working on it. Always a bit of a challenge trying to do things with one hand. Right, okay. Now the rest of this track layout is already fixed down. So here's our turnout. This track here is already fitted. It's an electrically wired. So anyway, let's bring this onto the workbench, and we'll start doing some preparations to it. Now, what I'm going to do here, some people might think that it's not for the faint-hearted, but one of these things is, what are they? They're about £65 these days, so they're not cheap anymore. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hack into this thing and just don't get too worried about it. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this coffin. So what I'm going to do is just take a pair of pliers and we cut the webbing. Cuts quite easily. Take that out there, and those 4 locations, and that's all we need to do. Now we've done that. Now if we turn the thing up the other way, what we find is that this lot the whole turnout actually falls apart now when we take this off, including the switch blades. So we'll take those out as well. And actually, I forgot something here. It's a good idea to just lift the top of this coffin off first, because it actually houses the spring. Just trying to do this one-handed, but it's not so easy. So just take that off there. There we go. Right, okay. So in here we've got the spring mechanism. Now we actually don't need that, because when I replace the mechanism and everything, I'm going to be powering this with a tortoise point motor. So we'll take the spring out, put it in there. Right, now the whole thing falls apart. So we can take that away. Our switch blades all fall apart as well, so we can take those out and take those off the end there, and there it is, it all comes apart. So that's that part. So there's going to be a few things that I do to this in a little while, but we'll just put that for one side right now. Right, okay, so what else do we need to do? Well, these are supplied, they are electro frog turnouts, but they're not properly wired. So what we will do is we're going to need to put some jumpers on these to bond the closure rails, these rails here, those two, with the stock rails. So what I'm going to do is these turnouts were made long, or they were designed long before Peco decided to make provisions for this sort of thing, like they did on their Code 75 turnouts. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut some gaps so that we can cut our sleepers out. Just cut some gaps in the webbing. And bit by bit we'll get there. Right, there we go. So let's get some tools out to clean it up a bit. Okay, that hasn't come off. Oh, I didn't actually go in hard enough with it. It's actually quite a quick job when you're doing it with two hands. Right, there we go. I'll get the other one off there as well. There we go. Right, okay, so there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some bondings across there. Now what I do is I've made up some bits of wire earlier, and what we'll do, these are longer than they need to be, but we'll trim them up. But what these will do is they will solder onto the undersides of the rails just there. Reason they've got a bend in them is so that they actually go below the sleepers and later ballast, and so they can't be seen. Now let's turn this thing around again, because we need to deal with these angled fish plates, sorry, angled sleepers. So let's take all the fish plates off that I had on here. There we go. Right, now the next bit of hacking that we do is take these off like so. Okay, now these bits we actually do break off, because it's actually easier to do it. So just break that off there, that comes off, and the same with that one there, we'll break that off as well, like so. Right, now, so what's going on here is I'm going to put more parallel sleepers in place. Now I'll just go over here and have a look at this turnout here, which I did earlier. I'm sure Blue Peter viewers will remember that terminology. Now what we have here is that there's a lot of extra sleepers, and this is where Peco have actually made these things far too short. As you can see, they've got the joins in the rails there. That's too short. Now real turnouts actually continue the crossing rails here out to about 2'6", and that's what this piece of card is. And it's 18 millimeters. It's not an exact science, but it depends on sleeper positions and things. But they continue with long sleepers out till about 2.6 2.5 foot on the stock rails. So the measurement's actually from these sides. Sorry, not stock rails, running rails on the insides of them, like so. Okay, so that's why I've got these extra sleepers. So that actually takes it up to a correct length, but and it makes it look a lot better, I think. So that's what we're going to do. Now the sleepers are actually, I've made these already. Probably saw them originally when in the first few shots in this video. These are actually 3D printed. I print them off in lengths like this one and then cut them to length. And the good thing is that the offcuts end up being, if you can paint them, end up being great wagon loads. So that's helpful. Right, now back to the turnout here. This bit here, I'm going to cut this off. Now it is a two-hand job, so for the moment I'll do this, and we're back in just a moment. Okay, so I've cut these pieces off here, off of the underside here. That's all nice and ready to be used. If we turn it over, we can see that it's all nice and straight. Now, this bit here in between the rails, I've actually chosen to leave this. You know, it's debatable. It's not a realistic feature, but it does give the structural integrity to the turnout. So for that reason, I'm actually not going to take it out. But what you could do is, once these turnouts are in place, you can probably drill them out then, when the structure doesn't matter so much because it's already fixed in place. Right, so here we go. So now we've got our turnout. All the cutting is now done, and the next bit to do is to do the soldering on the well, to make them electrically sound. Now a little bit more to do with that. In here there's a little bit of wiring that needs to be taken out, so what I'll do is I'll just take some snips to that, and we'll take those out. And there's another one here. I'll just take these out as well. They do break fairly easily when you're doing it with two hands anyway. There we go, that's broken. So what we'll do now is we'll just pull them off. So this, what this has done is has actually made the crossing V completely isolated, which is what you want, because what we're going to do is we're going to feed it from a switch on a tortoise point motor. Now they do actually supply a wire, this one here, to power the crossings, and I had plastic fish plates on the end there, so that was okay. And right now I've just got to clear these up, get rid of them. Okay, just push them down out the way. There we go. So what we've done here, turn this back over, is we've removed the wires that bridge these two gaps here, and over here this is the feed point for the crossing. So this whole area here is now electrically isolated. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to solder the bonding across these rails here, and it's a two-hand job, so I'll be back shortly. Right, okay, soldering is now done. So we've got those wires connecting stock rails to closure rails there. and I've also soldered a wire onto the crossing connection there as well. So this turnout is now properly wired for live frog, as they call it. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to put into place now, so that we can start preparing other bits and pieces. So let's put the wire down through the hole. So like so. Now just a little note on droppers here. Now a lot of people put nails and things under rails, and then they fiddle around trying to get the nail lined up with the undersides of the rails. Now I don't do that. What I do instead is I actually run my droppers out to the sides like this, and then that way you've got complete control over the position of your track. Now, probably a better example is on the other end here. So these two are actually soldered to the undersides of those fish plates, and there's some more there that are soldered on the undersides of the rails. But notice how the wires actually go to the sides out here and out here. And what that does is that gives you flexibility when laying the track. You can move it side to side, and your wires are not constraining you. Now I've actually put some pins in place with this one, so that's designed to align it. So for the moment what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it back into place and connect it up like so, and let's just get it aligned through the pins there. I think there's some pins up the other end that are holding it in place as well. So now that's pushed into place, and then right, there we go, all in place now. So the dropper's now dropped down the hole, got a pin there that's holding it in place, and that's all good. Right, okay, so the next thing to do is to start thinking about the sleepers. Now I've got an offcut here of just normal track, and what I do is I just line it up there and then use that as a guide to get the sleeper spacing the same, like so. So we just push them in a bit more. Actually, it's probably going to be a bit of fun because the fish plates here need moving slightly. Right, there we go. I think we're in place now. Yep, that's lined up there, and I'll turn this around. Notice how I use this side with the fixed positions, with the webbing between the sleepers. That means they can't change spacing. Now okay, so we've got a bit of an issue here. So this is why my spacing was an issue with the fish plates. Right, so just put that back there. Right, there we go. So that's all lined up. Now the next thing we're going to need to do is sort out the switch blades. Now here they are from earlier. Now I'm going to make some modifications to these to sort of de-Peco-ize them a bit. And if we have a look at one that I did on another turnout, we'll see what's going to happen. So what will be noticed is that on the edge here we cut the rounded edge off of both sides, and that's basically it. That's the only modification that we make. Idea is to just make it into a straight tie bar. Now again, these things are not perfect. They're not very realistic. Once you get a bit of paint on them and some weathering, they'll hide down. But the one advantage of these things is in this form is that they are actually pretty strong. So that's the main reason why I've kept them. So what I'm going to do now on the cutting board is cut this to the shape that we want, and because it's a two-hand job, I'll do that and we'll be back. So here are the modified switch blades and tie bar. So what I've done is I've cut the edge here to keep it straight on both sides, and I've also shortened them on both ends as well. Now these are actually quite easy to put in or fit in place. So what I will do is put them back in place. Now one of the things that, having done a few of these, I've come to discover is that if we leave these sleepers out here until the last minute, we can actually put our blades in and adjust them as much as we want until we're happy with them. There we go. So that's now in place, and we can see that goes side to side like so. Right, okay, so I've actually got some sleepers here which will go in. So we've got these three, and they're cut out for my normal 3D printed lengths. Now nothing scientific about these. The lengths are just identical to the Peco bits that we cut out, and the spacing will be the same. So I'll use this as a template to actually space them as well. All right, okay, so the next step is that we need to sort out the point motor. Now I'm using tortoise motors, and what I've done is I've pre-wired it all up so that it all connects into this screw terminal here. That means if ever I need to replace one in a hurry, they're just a screw attachment to replace them. Now viewers are probably looking at this and saying, hey, you know, that operating wire is bent. There is a reason in my madness. Sorry, there's a method in my madness. Now, we took away the Peco spring, and the Peco spring has the effect of pushing the switchblade, so the tie bar, in this direction. Now we've taken that out. Now the advantage of that is that it keeps these joints here closed. So we now need to have an equivalent of that, and that is why I bend the operating wire of the tortoise in that direction, so that it actually presses the tie bar in that direction. And I've done all these turnouts in this way, and it keeps these joint gaps closed permanently, so we don't have any issues with them. Okay, so the next step, I've already drilled, as you can see in the picture here, I've already drilled a hole in the board. Tortoise are actually really good with this. They supply a little template that you can just cut out, and you can see my lines here on the board of where I've put this in place. You just line it up, and these are the holes for attaching the motor. They line up with those, and these are the holes for the actual hole in the board for the tie bar. So it's a handy little template. They do actually do a separate, I think it's plastic or metal piece that's the same thing, but the paper thing's perfectly adequate, I find. Right, okay, so the next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the point motor in place. It's a fiddly exercise. To start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these switch blades out. so that I can just point the operating arm up the hole. And what we do is we just put the motor in a central position so that we get a central position in the hole. What's all this card, I hear you say? That's all levelling. Cork isn't perfect, and nor board construction as hard as we try, and the card is various different thicknesses, but it actually levels up the track. So if we look up on the track, it's actually very level, so we can adjust that. Now the camera makes that easy to look at, but when we're actually doing it for ourselves, I have a little technique which involves a mirror. And the good thing about a mirror is it allows you to look at the track at whatever angles you want. And if you put it near the edge and adjust it, you can actually look up at the rails, and you can look along the tops of them, and you can see how level your track is. And that's what I do to check the level of all of my track. And I used to do it in my 00 days, and I'm doing it on this 7mm layout, but it's really handy, and it means that you don't have to put your head on the board to line your eyes up with the rails. And if you're visually challenged like me with glasses, it's actually a lot easier to look in a mirror and get everything in focus as well. So it's a handy little tool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fit the point motor. Means I've got to disappear under the boards, so I'll do that under here. So this is where it's going to go. There's the slot, and you can see some drill holes there where I drilled the mounting screws for the point motor through as well. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put that in. So I'll be back in a while. Alright, point motor now fitted into place. Let's go and have a look up top. Right, so here we have our operating arm wire from the point motor. As you can see, it's in a central position there. Now the next thing that I do is put the switch blades into place, and this is where leaving the sleepers out is an absolute godsend, because you can fiddle around with this as much as you like, adjusting it until you get it right. But the alternative is that you're under the board, pushing the motor up, trying to get it lined up to fit through the hole in the tie bar, and it's just absolutely impossible to do. So this way makes it so much easier. Now you can already see how the springiness of the wire is actually pushing these into place. So let's put them into place like so. There we go. Right, okay, so that's now in place. And space them out like so, and then we'll use the where's the Peco thing gone? Here we go, it's the Peco thing, and what we just use that to space them out. Anyway, a little bit later on we'll glue those into place and go from there. Right, okay, so that's that end of the turnout. The only thing really to finish that off is really to just glue it all down. Up the other end, we've still got a little bit more work to do. Now, what I do here is these 3D printed sleepers are actually exactly the same size as the Peco sleepers. And what I did was I measured the spacing of the Peco sleepers, which is from that face to that face is 16 millimeters. So then I draw out 16 millimeters to that line, 32, up in steps of 16, so that we draw the positions of all of our sleepers. Now just bring them all into place like so. Like that. Now don't just remember that these are not fitted into place yet, but what I do is I just use a straight edge to align them there, and they'll all be glued down. And then on the other side I cut them to match the lengths as well. There's cut square, not diagonal, so but they all match up with the with the Peco sleepers, and so that they fit. I'm just going to put the fish plates back on so that we can have another look at this. And let's go and get the fish plates. So we've got a couple of plastic ones and we've got a couple of metal ones. Now, a couple of little tips here. These fish plates are actually, the ones that they sell for O gauge are actually the same as 00. They're the same product. However, what you find with O gauge is that they're too long to fit between two neighbouring chairs. So they need to be cut short. Now in 00, what people tended to do, and I've been guilty of it myself, in fact I'll just turn around and we can have a look at Ashbrington Road, which is a 4mm layout. This is Peco track, and I'll just home in on this joint here, and this is the sort of thing that we used to do. If you look at that fish plate carefully, the two sleepers either end of it have had the chairs cut away, and that's how we did it. Now in 00, that's you can get away with it, but in O gauge it's a little bit more obvious. So what we do is we have to cut this fish plate shorter, and that's what I've done here. Now with board joints, and this is a personal choice thing, but with board joints I'm actually using those are short ones there. I have actually got some long ones across the joints. Here we go, there's an example there, so that I can push the fish plate back when I'm putting the boards together, and then slide them back in with a screwdriver. You can hide them. One thing that I've done on the other turnouts here is to put extra chairs on. Now it's not totally right, but by the time you get it covered in paint and weathering, it hides it. Fish plates fitted, and I've connected up the neighbouring track sections as well. Now a word on sleeper spacing here. There are maximum requirements as to how far a rail is allowed to be unsupported. What I've done here just to keep it consistent is to use Peco track as a guide. So as you can see, this bit here is matching the Peco distance. I think from memory it's about 3 foot, which is actually a fair way. And if you actually put 3 foot 21mm here, it actually looks quite weird actually. So anyway, keep the sleeper spacing consistent. Now another word about the sleepers here. Notice how I've cut them short. Now real railways have done different things about this in this situation, and it comes down to the engineers involved as to how it actually gets done. I've actually shortened them. Reason for that is that when you have interleaved sleepers, what happens is that the track maintenance gangs, they dig their shovels under sleepers to pack ballast underneath them, and if you've got two sleepers that are interleaved, that's twice as much distance, and it makes it harder for the job. In modern days, we have tamping machines, and they would also have an issue as well. So I've gone for this approach where the sleepers are basically aligned and they're cut short, and this is part of the reason for the distance of between the running rails, 18 mils there, to set that situation. I will be putting some chairs on here. It's a bit chairless at the moment, but that will come once all of this is stuck down. So the next step for this turnout is to glue it down. So here I've stuck the turnout down. I use this glue to stick them down. I'm not a track pin person, however, there are pins here at the ends of sleepers that you can probably see. Personally, I think that's the only use for track pins, to hold track in place while it's being glued. Now, I've just glued this in place, and I like to keep my track straight, so up comes the mirror, and the mirror lets me look upon the track to see that it's perfectly straight. Now the reflections there are making it look like it's not straight, but it actually is. And I use a long rule to put along the side of the rail here to make sure it's all straight as well. So there's not a lot I can do now until this is glued down. Now, to make sure it does glue down, I just need some weights, and these things are pretty good, so I'll leave those there overnight, and we'll come back tomorrow and finish the job. The turnout's now had some time to stick to the boards, so it's now time to take the weights off, and we'll check all the levels and start with the electrical wiring. So let's just move these weights. That's 1, 2. Right, okay, they're out of the way. So let's get the trusty mirror, and what we'll do is we'll just line it up and see how our track alignment is. It should be good because it was when we set it up. There we go, that's perfectly straight, so that's all good. No issues with that. Let's have a look at the levels in there as well. There we go, so we get to look up at the track there, and that's looking good. There's a little bit of a dip just where the switch blades will be, but that's okay because we'll be putting some bearers there for that to be supported. So there we go. Okay, so all good. Right, so the next step is to start the electrical wiring. Now, we've got the feed here for the crossing. That's hanging down below at the moment, and we know that can go into the common of one of the switches on the tortoise point motor. We have to be careful about wiring this because this is a DCC layout with a 5 amp system, and to be safe when we do it, we don't really want to go checking things with locomotives, because if we get the wiring of this round the wrong way, we can end up creating a short through a loco across these joints. And O-gauge locomotives are not exactly cheap, and I don't think 5 amps will go through the pickups very well, so without damage. So what I do to check all of that is have a trusty 12 volt light bulb, and we'll be doing the testing with that. So first step is to wire up the crossing V, and I'll have a quick look under here. So we've got the wire here. This is the crossing wire, and we need to run it through to one of the switches on there, so I'll do that now. Okay, with a bit of wiring in place, we're now ready to test this turnout. So what we do is, at the moment, this turnout is switched to the left running rail, and what we'll do is we'll just put the voltage across there to check our light bulb, and that lights up, so that's actually looking good straight away. So now let's manually change the turnout the other way. Okay, do that slowly, and what we should find with that is that if we connect this up again, we get no light, which is what we would expect, and it should now be over here, which it is. So that proves that the turnout is wired up correctly. I'll just put it back the other way, do one last check, and we should find that this is now dead, which it is. It's dead across there, but it should be live across there, which it is. There we go. Okay, all good. So that's electrically wired up correctly, and now the next steps are that we can start putting the sleepers into place. So I need to put a little bit more cardboard in place here, and I'm going to need to put a little bit more there as well, so that the full length of the sleepers is properly supported. So I'll do that and we'll be back. So with a bit more cardboard added on the side there, and a little bit more down here as well, we're now ready to start putting the sleepers into place to support all these unsupported rails. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a bit of glue on the base here for the first sleeper, on the same boundary as the normal sleeper measurement, so the spacing is the same. So the right hand end of this, sorry, the left hand end should match up to that, and that's actually consistent with Peco's own turnouts. So we'll just make sure it's the same on the other side as well, which it isn't, so we just need to adjust that. Bring it round a bit, here we go. And just double check this side again, because I think we've moved it. Yep, we did. So we just need to move that a tiny bit there. Right, okay, so let's get a straight plastic piece here as well, so that we can just make sure that the sleepers are all lined up properly, like that. Okay, so we should all be in place with that first sleeper, which we are, and on the other side there we are as well. All good. Right, okay, so now we're ready to do the next one. Now with this I will use the Peco's piece of sleep ring that we cut out. So this is the bit with the coffin on it, so just turn it over and we'll be aligning these sleepers here. So just put a bit more glue on the track bed. Bit there, a bit there, there, lastly a bit there. Okay, cool. Right, now what we'll do is we'll slide the sleepers in. So that's one roughly in position, and that's two roughly in position. So we'll use the Peco piece to line them up. So that's lined up, that's lined up, get that stuck down there. And then we'll do the same on the other side. Sorry, apologies for the focus. It's tricky to do this at the same time with one hand as film it. Right, okay, so that first sleeper's in place. Now we get that one in place there as well. So I think we're looking good there. Sure, that one's moved a bit too much that way. Right, let's check again. Yeah, okay, that's good. Check on this side as well. Move that one slightly. And then we'll put the straight edge along here. Make sure they all butt up. Here we go. So that, I think, is looking about right. And that one's still not right. We moved it again. Just keep checking it until we get it right. Right, okay, got it right now. Just double check this side as well. Yep, all good. Right, okay, so there we go. So that's all now in place. Now, a word about the sleepers on these turnouts. If we look at the turnout vertically, what you'll notice is that this is a right-handed turnout, and this is the straight here, straight stock rail here. And notice how the sleepers are not at right angles perpendicular to that that straight stock rail. Now, that is a practice that was done on the real British railways, but it wasn't that common. It was much more common for the sleepers to be perpendicular to the straight stock rail. I don't know why Peco have done this, but it's another one of those things that are not quite right about these turnouts. With the main timbers fitted at the end here now, I'm going to let these stick down before I do anything further to them. Notice how I've used this edge here, this piece of offcut, just as a straight edge to line up all the sleeper ends. As you can see, they are diagonal across the turnout slightly, or sorry, at an angle. But that's how Peco make them. So the next step is going to be to fit some chairs. Now, back here, we need some slide chairs to sit under these rails. Now, Peco actually do make some products to do that. and these are the two. On the left there is slide chairs, and on the right is just ordinary running chairs. So the running chairs are just used on straight pieces of track. I've got a piece here, there we go. Those are running chairs, and further over here on this turnout you can see the slide chairs there, and we'll be doing the same on this turnout. So here are the slide chairs, and we'll be fitting those in, but I'm going to let everything glue solid before I start fitting these in. But what will happen is that they'll sit on there and they will tuck under the rails. Now they might be a tight fit because there's a little bit of a dip here in the rail, so these will lift it up and make it level. Yeah, so that needs a little bit of pressing in, so I'm not going to do that right now, but we'll put all these slide chairs here. We need 6 of them all up, so they're all ready to go. I'll do those when it's all dry, and up the other end here I'm going to need a whole load of running chairs here as well, so I'll sort those out as well. And notice how the 3D printing has got a bit of a grain on it. That's actually the grain of the print bed and the diagonal way that it prints out as well. But you file it up, and it actually doesn't look too bad for a timber effect, and by the time we put some paint on it, it probably look quite good. So that does the job for us. With the long sleepers now fully glued down and fixed in place and dried, it's now time to start putting the running chairs on the siding lines here. Now I've already started doing this one. You can see that I've put some on that track there. I've still got to do this one, so I'll just slide that off like so and pull it over here to the workbench, where I've got a number of these Peco Individuale running chairs. Now these are moulded with keys on them, so they're the little wooden wedges that hold the rails in place, and just remember that those are supposed to go on the outside of the running rail. They never went on the inside, and we thread those on to the rails like so. Press them on and pull them up. Okay, so I'll just do a few of those, and then we'll put it back together. Right, with a load of chairs in place now, this is now ready to be put back into place. Now, just a note on the keys on these Peco turnouts. Peco only model them moulded in one direction, and that is the key is actually to the right, which means that the keys here point that way and the keys here point that way. Now that's not actually prototypically correct unless it's a bi-directional line and there's movement in the rails in both directions. Normally the keys are in one direction. It does of course mean that with Peco there's no chance of getting them around the wrong way with adjacent chairs. And of course the other thing is that most people are not going to see the other side of the track anyway, so it's not really going to notice. But just a little tip there, just trying to fit this in place so that we can start. There we go. Right, that's now in place, and just get my tweezers and use them to move these chairs into place like so. They just slide along the rails. Sometimes they're a little bit tight, but most of the time they just slide fairly easily like so. And then these ones here into place like so. There we go, so they're all in place. they will now need gluing. Now, given that these sidings are yet to be aligned and the track laid, I'm not going to actually fix these down in place yet, but suffice to say that we've got other turnouts over here where these have been fixed in place. The white that you can see in the image is actually the effects of the glue, but it will be I'm going to airbrush the whole lot, so it'll hide all of that. That's really what's involved in modifying one of these turnouts, and I think it looks a whole lot more realistic. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please feel free to add any comments below, and also any questions. Happy modelling.